We were having these conversations in 2017. We were probably also having, we were having these conversations in 27, in 1997, in 1987. Like, this is not a new conversation. And I think what can be frustrating about the type of conversation we're trying to have is that there's like a little bit of tiredness, and especially the sense of urgency that we're getting, I think, from communities outside of like racialized communities. And I can speak most to that because those are the communities that I'm part of. But I think there's like a fatigue because it feels like, how do we have to keep saying? And there's like this weird mental barrier where only now do people feel the urgency that we felt so long ago.
Welcome to ABCDEI, a podcast that explores topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion through stories of distinct and powerful lived experiences.
If you are tired of the preaching, shaming, and theory about why inclusion matters and just want to create change already, then you're in the right place.
Join us as we unlearn bias one alphabet at a time. My name is Susan Diaz.
And I'm Rohini Mukherji.
Hello and welcome to ABCDEI. We're back again this week to dive deep into some subjects really close to our hearts here. So Rohini, who do we have?
So I'm very excited to introduce Gail Strachan. Gail has really become, she's an inspirational friend and ally, and we've really crossed paths so much in the last few months. So I'm very, very excited to be talking to her today. Most recently, she is the co-founder of the first ever national summit on anti-racism in PR. So Gail, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Rohini. And absolutely, we've definitely crossed paths many times over the past few weeks. Yeah. And now I've been introduced to Susan Diaz. So we're just taking over. BIPOC is coming up.
Yeah, love it.
Stacy Lee Kong is a writer, editor. Stacy and I go back many, many years to when we were very young in the journalism and PR fields, respectively. But also, most recently, Stacy is the author of one of my favorites and my first newsletter run by a media journalist. And Friday Things is it's a dose of joy, but it sort of feels like a serious conversation while having a fun conversation.
Thank you, first of all, for the best, I think, intro I've ever gotten. A serious conversation disguised as a fun conversation is like my whole brand. It's 100% what I always want to have. So thank you.
So Gail, introduce yourselves to our guests and listeners a little bit.
So going into university at York, I studied Latin American Caribbean Studies and Political Science. What job would I get thereafter? I thought I was going into law, but and I thought, okay, this is a good baseline. So, but it was also my curiosity, because why is the world structured the way it is? Why are people from India having these Spanish sounding names? How come, the house for Mr. Biswath, how come he's in Guyana? Where did this structure of hierarchy come from in society? So I just wondered, how come my mom's Guyanese friend looks like a white man? I don't get it. So it was all these why questions that brought me to this path. And by last summer, I was fed up. I was angry, I was emotional, I was upset. And I said, it's time for us to start talking about racism straight up, because all of these socioeconomic issues are layered in race. And we talk about inclusion and diversity, but we never talk about race. So we need to start talking about race. That's one of the power structures. Canada had over 200 years of slavery. Canada has had internships of Italian, Chinese. Canada has used the colored class as labor. Canada is on land that didn't belong to us. So, what it was our federal schools,
residential
schools that were just closed in 1996, federal. So that was the awakening for me at the summit. I thought, okay, all of the residential schools are closed. No, just the federal was closed in 1996. So we think we've evolved into this better place, but I always also remind people I am in Canada because I came here in 1975 because Canada allowed immigrants to come outside of now the labor program. So that the wave of the brain drain of the Caribbean that came in the 60s was because Canada wanted to be a part of the United Nations. There's a reason for us coming in, but just for labor. And then thereafter, we were permitted to come in, but still not permitted to, have the jobs that we teacher for teacher, not from the Caribbean to Canada, not from India to Canada, not from Asia to Canada. It was, you're here for labor, for the labor that has now moved forward. Because you look at the wave of who are the nannies and who, how has that changed in terms of across BIPOC. So that's Canada's history, and it's not better. It's still racist. I was accepted to all the universities that I applied for. I specifically went to York because I saw students who looked like me. I didn't go to Queen's, I didn't go to Western, I didn't go to McGill because there was definitely a conversation of campus representation that I was concerned about. That was in 1992. It's still the same. My daughter specifically didn't go to any of those universities I named because she was concerned about campus representation. So, and now thereafter, we see what Queen's has uncovered in terms of having policies that specifically held back Black students from applying to medical school. So it's there. It's not as blatant. It's not saying I will not be hiring anyone who is of darker skin than me. But you see it in the way people are interviewed. You see it in the reasons why you didn't make the cut. You see it in the reasons why we don't pull up the middle. You see it in the reasons why across the board, across Canada, most everyone is saying the same thing. We're diverse, but we have an inclusion problem. We're diverse in the entry level and beginning level and maybe kind of in the middle level of our workforce, but we don't see it near the top. Why? Why is everyone having a frozen middle problem?
Stacey, maybe I'll turn it to you and you can tell us about the inspiration.
I think of like the celebrity, pop culture, internet trend world as like a clever trick. You think that that's what I'm talking about, but actually what I'm talking about is race or gender or, like the things that we face in our daily lives that are intersectional because, like my race is not divorced from my gender, the way people see me, whether people hire me, what they think of me. And I want to make that conversation more accessible by being like, hey, Kim Kardashian. We all know Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian is a nice example of whatever thing that I'm annoyed about that week. I mean, obviously, I'm a woman of color. I've been thinking about race and gender and all of these and class and all these different intersections like my whole life. But it's interesting to me because I've been writing about race from this perspective and in this way for years. And it's sometimes a little bit sad to be like, so wait, where were you guys? Like, where were you in 2017? I'm just wondering because like we have been having these conversations. And so I do feel a little bit of on one hand, it's really great that people are paying so much more attention and that there's a little bit more interest in the type of work that I'm trying to do. And on the other hand, I'm like, but what if you had listened in 2017?
To your point from earlier about why weren't we doing this in 2017? We were trying. Why wasn't anyone hearing us? I think what you bring to the table, Stacey, in terms of like breaking that conversation down into names that are recognizable and actual today examples, that's powerful.
Thank you. I will say too, like we should point out that like we were having these conversations in 2017. We were probably also we were having these conversations in 27, in 1997, in 1987. Like this is not a new conversation. And I think what can be frustrating about the type of conversations we're trying to have is that there's like a little bit of tiredness and especially the sense of urgency that we're getting, I think, from communities outside of like racialized communities. And I can speak most to that because those are the communities that I'm part of. But I think there's like a fatigue because it feels like how do we have to keep saying and keep saying? And there's like this weird mental barrier where only now do people feel the urgency that we felt so long ago.
I came here, when I was really young. I came here for university. I didn't really have the BIPOC experience that we're talking about in terms of coming here as an adult and trying to find a place in a market that frankly isn't as open as, immigration policies claim to be. And so, it's really important that when we're doing some of those shortcuts, it's human nature, that's how the brain works, that we check ourselves, in the spirit of unlearning to see what we might be overlooking by bundling people under a category that might be overlooking some of their individual attributes and strengths.
We keep talking about same, but different. And the reason we talk about that is that it's one of those little cliches that we picked up from living in the Sultanate of Oman like years and years ago. And that phrase is used to describe the idea that, similar, really, it means similar. You've got similarities, but you're not identical. There's a lot different. And, like Rohini said, our actual lived experiences even to this day are quite different. I'm the mom of a 9-year-old. I homeschool my child alongside running a business. And I came here, as you said, because I moved as a grown-up, as an adult, came here as an immigrant and sort of went through that process of seeing that being qualified for the job does not get you the job. In many ways, I'm lucky, perhaps, that my name is Susan Diaz, and it's nice and vague enough to not know where exactly I'm from. And so I might not have had some of the bias directed towards me, but I know for a fact that my husband has, because his name is distinctly, different.
If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to hit subscribe and please drop us a review. If you want to learn more about us or the ABCDEI podcast, visit abcdei.ca.